Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil ameen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man istanna bi sunnatihi ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Inshallah ta'ala, let's continue with hadith number 34, inshallah ta'ala. Let's have somebody read this hadith for us after we get it on the screen, inshallah. Any volunteers to read? Ibrahim. There we go. I see you hiding.
On the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam say, whoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. And if he is not able to do so, then let him change it with his tongue. And if he is not able to do so, then with his heart. If he is not able to do so, then with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith.
Ahsanta, jazakallahu khairan. طيب, so this is our next hadith, and it's narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu. And we've already spoken about Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, so we don't need to mention any more things about his biography, inshallah ta'ala. So moving on, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran," that whoever sees an evil, فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ, then let him stop it with his hand. Let him go and physically stop the evil. Anybody who sees evil, and this is a general statement. Anytime you see a hadith that mentions whoever, right? Man ra'a minkum. Man in the Arabic language, it means who, and it refers to anybody. It's a general statement, right? Man min adawat al-umum. It's one of the devices that show generality. In other words, nobody is specified from this statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everybody's included. Right? So everybody who's sitting here today, and everybody who's listening, everybody who hears this hadith or reads this hadith is speaking directly to you. Right? And it's talking about a situation in which you see evil. مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. Whoever sees an evil among you, let him stop it with his hand. So number one, when you see an evil in front of you, when you see somebody doing something wrong. Now a munkar, and anytime you hear the word munkar in Islam, whether that's a hadith or a verse of the Quran, right? Then that refers to something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it refers to something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala detests and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates, right? In other words, it's referring to the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram, the things that Allah azza wa jal hates and dislikes. So, and there's many examples of this, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, let there rise up a nation among you, right? يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, right? Enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, the munkar. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ, right away in this hadith, he's primarily talking about seeing something evil, right? We have this broad concept in Islam, and that's commanding the ma'roof, commanding the good, and then there's forbidding the munkar, forbidding the evil. This hadith is specifically talking about evil here. Alright, but like I said, it's part of a general concept, right, of promoting good and forbidding evil. Right, so this hadith is the most famous hadith that the scholars use, and that's why Imam Nawawi put it in his collection, is because it's the most important hadith that we have when it relates to stopping evil. Because this hadith explains to you as a Muslim how you should go about stopping evil. It's not just as soon as you see something wrong, right away you stop it. The Prophet said the first obligation is to do what? To stop it with your hand. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ. If a person is not able, if you're not able, each and every single one of us, if we're not able to stop it with our hands, فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِلِسَانِهِ. Then let him change it with his tongue. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ. And if he's not able, فَبِقَلْبِهِ. Then with his, then with his heart. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And that's the weakest of iman. I personally feel that this is one of the most important hadiths that any Muslim hears in their entire lives. And personally me, this is, if not one of the favorite hadiths that I have in this collection, if not the most favorite, it's one of my favorite hadiths in this collection because of how practical it is. Right? So we'll be mentioning a lot of principles that the scholars that they mention when it comes to understanding this hadith and how to go about implementing this hadith, inshallah ta'ala. Now, when it comes to forbidding the evil, alright, this is the job of all of the prophets. All of the prophets, they came, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the messengers, they were رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. That the messengers, their job was to do two things, right? It was to be mubashirin, it was to give the people good, glad tidings, to give the people hope, to tell the people about paradise, about the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمُنذِرِينَ. and also to warn the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment, to warn the people of everything that is evil and everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates and detests. So that's the job of all of the prophets. But there's a very beautiful hadith, and it's in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhum. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, مَا مِن نَبِيٍّ بَعَثَهُ اللَّهُ فِي أُمَّةٍ قَبْلِي, that there was no prophet that was sent in any nation before me, إِلَّا وَيَقْتَدُونَ بِأَمْرِهِ إلا كان له من أمته حواريون وأصحاب يأخذون بسنته ويقتدون بأمره. The Prophet said that every single prophet that was sent before me, they all had Sahaba. They all had, companions and followers and supporters that will follow their sunnah. Right? So we are no different. We're from among those followers of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as every prophet had their followers. Isa alayhi salam, he had his disciples. Musa alayhi salam had his followers. Every single prophet had, and this is a general principle, right? Because there's a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, where he mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was shown the day of judgment, and he was shown different prophets. And one prophet had, like a huge nation, and the Prophet thought that that was his nation. And then he looked around and he saw one prophet with about less than 10 people. Then he saw a prophet with 1 or 2 followers, and then he saw a prophet with no followers. So this hadith is telling us in Sahih Muslim that every prophet had followers, but then again you have like another hadith where there's going to be prophets on the day of judgment who had no followers. So how do we reconcile between these two things? The scholars, they mention a couple ways of reconciling between them, but the best way is to understand that this is a general hadith. It's for the most part. For the most part, every prophet had followers. But they were very rare cases, right? And there's like a principle that the scholars mention, and that is an-nadiru la hukma lah, that whatever is rare, then there's no ruling attached to that thing, because it's so rare. So because the Prophet sometimes he says a general statement, but he doesn't specify like a very rare situation because of how rare it is. But he says almost every single prophet had followers and companions. Think about how beautiful that is. So just as we learned about Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and all of the Sahaba, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them, Ameen. Just as how we learn about them, every prophet had followers as well. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that these followers, they would follow the commandments of their prophets. ثم إنها تخلف من بعدهم خلوف يقولون ما لا يفعلون ويعملون ما لا يؤمرون. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, then after these followers died out, then came people after these prophets that would do the things that they would not say, and they would say what they do not do. So then the Prophet he continues, فَمَنْ جَاهَدَهُمْ, so whoever strives against them, بِيَدِهِ فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, whoever strives against them with his hand, then he's a believer. وَمَنْ جَاهَدَهُمْ بِلِسَانِهِ, and whoever strives against them with his tongue, فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, then he's a believer. وَمَنْ جَاهَدَهُمْ بِقَلْبِهِ, and whoever strives against them with his heart, فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, then he is a believer. وَلَيْسَ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ حَبَّةُ خَرْدَلٍ, and there is nothing beyond that of Iman more than a mustard seed of Iman. In other words, that's the lowest part of Iman. So you see how this hadith, the Prophet mentions that how, there were people that would follow the prophets, and then after them came people that would change the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That would follow the wrong path. And the Prophet said to strive against them with your tongue. Right? He said first and foremost to strive against them with your hands. If you're not able, then with your tongue, and then with your heart. So very similar to this hadith right here. Right? So from this hadith, from this beautiful hadith, we learn that this is a job of all of the prophets, right? And this is the job of all of the followers of those prophets. So this message that the Prophet ﷺ is giving us right here is a universal message, right? From the time of Adam ﷺ all the way to the time of Muhammad ﷺ up to our time. So now the Prophet ﷺ, he says in this hadith, whoever sees an evil. Now does it mean that let's say I don't see it, but I hear it in front of me, then that means I don't have to stop it, it's not an obligation upon me? No, it's the same thing. As long as I'm certain that this thing is happening in front of me, in my presence, then it's an obligation on me to do something about it. And we're going to mention a couple examples, inshallah ta'ala. But we must first realize that it's an obligation. And the scholars have ijma' on this. There's no disagreement that enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is obligatory upon everybody. We all have a part to play in this grand role. Now, so as I mentioned, that it's something that's an obligation. Now let's talk about some prerequisites, right? Because when you see an evil happening in front of you, there's certain things you have to make sure that exist within yourself before you're able to do that, right? And there's a principle that the scholars mentioned that is لا إنكار إلا بعد علم, that there is no forbidding any evil except after knowledge. You need to have knowledge about that thing first. In other words, how am I going to enjoin the good and forbid the evil? How am I going to stop an evil with my hand or with my tongue or my heart, and I don't even know about that evil, right? Perhaps the person is doing something right, right? So to reprimand somebody, to stop them from doing something evil, I need to have knowledge of that first. Is everybody clear on this point? Okay, there's many proofs for this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids us from speaking without knowledge, right? Allah azza wa jalla, He mentions in Surah Al-A'raf that one of the greatest sins, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram. Right, at the end of that ayah, Allah azza wa jalla, He mentions وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And that is that you speak against Allah with things that you don't even know about. Right? That's one of the greatest sins in Islam, and that's to speak on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge. To say something about His deen, to say something about the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any knowledge. And if you want to, if you're forbidding an evil, you're kind of making a ruling there. And if you do so without knowledge, then you might fall into this sin. And there's a principle that Imam al-Bukhari mentions, and that is al-ilmu qabla al-qawli wal-amal. Right? And this is a statement that we have to hold on to and have in our hearts. Right? We have to implement this statement because it's based on the truth. And that is that speech and actions come after knowledge. Right? That knowledge precedes statements and actions. In other words, you need to know what you're saying before you say it. You need to know what you're doing before you do it. That's the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jalla commands him in the Quran, in Surah Yunus. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, قُل, say to them, O Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي, this is my path. أَدْعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ, I call to Allah. Now, I call to Allah upon what? Upon misguidance, upon ignorance? No. عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ, upon insight, upon knowledge, upon understanding. أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي, I call to this way, and those who follow me. So we want to be included in this, inshallah ta'ala, to be among those who follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in calling people to the religion of Allah based on understanding and knowledge. Right? So that's something that we must understand. It's very important. Now, that's the first prerequisite. But the scholars, they mention some other ones as well. Right? They mention some other ones as well. So you need to have knowledge before, and you need to have gentleness while forbidding the evil, and you need to have patience afterwards. Now, obviously, we know why we need to have gentleness while we're forbidding the evil is because, are you going to listen to anybody who's treating you as an enemy? No, right? Immediately, your immediate reaction is going to be to argue back and to defend yourself. So that's why when you want to stop somebody from doing evil, you have to use wisdom. You have to be gentle with that person, right? Because otherwise, they're not going to want to listen to you. Alright? And that's why there's a hadith in Sahih Muslim where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِنَّ الرِّفْقَ لَا يَكُونُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَهُ. That gentleness, anything that gentleness is involved in, it beautifies it. Gentleness beautifies everything. So when you see your kids doing something wrong, be gentle. Right? Be gentle. Try to advise them in a proper way. Your spouse does something wrong, try to advise that person in a nice, gentle way. Now obviously every situation is different. Sometimes you have to be a bit stern. The kid's not listening, right? Or, there's like a really big problem, you have to be stern. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, he would get angry, right? In certain situations. So it's a case-by-case situation. But the general rule is that we should be gentle, right? The Prophet ﷺ, there's a very beautiful hadith. He says, بَشِّرُوا وَلَا تُنَفِّرُوا. That give the people hope and don't run the people away. Right? Don't run the people away. So you have to be really smart how you're advising somebody when it comes to stopping the evil. And of course, you have to have patience afterwards. Right? You have to have patience afterwards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-An'am, وَلَقَدْ كُذِّبَتْ رُسُلٌ مِّن قَبْلِكَ فَصَبَرُوا عَلَى مَا كُذِّبُوا وَأُوذُوا حَتَّى أَتَاهُمْ نَصْرُنَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and the messengers before you, they were rejected. They were rejected. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned they were harmed, وَأُوذُوا. They were harmed by their people. Right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَصَبَرُوا. And they were patient, حَتَّى أَتَاهُمْ نَصْرُنَا. Until our help came to them. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that the prophets, they had to have sabr. So just as we're doing the job of the prophets, the job of the followers of the prophets, and that is forbidding evil, we need to have patience. Right? Because sometimes it's not easy. You tell your family something, and sometimes it may take years for them to listen. But you need to have patience. It's not easy. right? The Prophet ﷺ, he had so many, Sahaba who accepted Islam. It took them almost 20 years to accept Islam. Look at Abu Sufyan, right? It took him almost 20 years to accept Islam, right? So for some people it's going to take a long time, and for some people they're just not going to listen, right? They're not going to listen. But if you've done what's obligated upon you, and that's to stop the evil in whatever way you can, then you've done your part, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ, right? Allah says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you're not a dictator over them, right? You're not sent to control the people, right? And then, in other places in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينَ, that your only job is to clarify the message to the people. So once you've done that, inshallah ta'ala, then you've done what Allah Azza wa Jalla has commanded you. Alright? So the next principle I'm going to mention is that wisdom is a must. Wisdom is a must. If you know that if you advise a person in a particular way and that's going to cause them to do more evil, it's haram for you to advise that person in that way. Right? You have to give that person advice in a way that's susceptible to them accepting it. That's very important. Some people, they think, oh, we need to stop it with our hands. So as soon as you see your wife doing something wrong, you grab her and you push her down and you stop it with your hand, literally. No, but no. There was a sister, she said that how, her husband was watching a video. This is a true story, by the way. I'm not making this up. There's a sister, she said that how, and she just got married as well. She said that how her husband was watching a video. And the sheikh or the maulana, whoever was in the video, said that the Jews will enter the fire. It is something that we have to believe as Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ, he says that no Christian or Jew hears about me, then he does not believe in me except that he's going to be from the people of the fire. Authentic hadith. So that's something we have to believe. Now, he asked her after watching this video, he's like, where are the Jews going to go? And because she doesn't know, she said, I don't want to put anybody in the fire. Allah will be the judge. So right away, he saw her say something wrong. He grabbed her hand, like violently. And he says that if you say that one more time, I'm going to divorce you. Crazy people out there, wallahi. Right? So this person obviously has a warped understanding of what this hadith is saying. Right? Now obviously, that, if you do things like this, it's going to cause the person to want to distance themselves away from you more and more. And they're not going to want to listen to you. But obviously, imagine a situation if he was nice. He's like, honey, sweetie, let me show you the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he said X, Y, and Z. Right? So this is why we have to believe this as Muslims. Imagine how better that would have been. Right? But no, you want to be a tyrant, a dictator. No, you can't do this. I'm going to push you down and grab your hand and twist your arm, and it's not going to work like that. Right? So you need to have hikmah. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah." Call to the way of your Lord with hikmah, with understanding and with wisdom. Right? Very important that we have to understand this as Muslims, because on a daily basis we see the wrong things happening. Right? We live in a society where haram is easy and halal is hard. Right? So we see a lot of wrong things, and sometimes you see your brother doing something wrong, your father, your mother, your wife, your kids, somebody in the masjid. You need to have hikmah. Right? You need to be smart. Right? In other words, approach the person in a way that you would want to be approached. And this all goes back to that hadith number 13, I believe it's hadith number 13, where the Prophet ﷺ, he says that none of you truly have iman until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So this hadith right here is kind of a branch from that hadith. Right? Very important for us to understand this. Now, a next principle that we have to understand is that to stop with the hand, you need authority. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that whoever among you sees an evil, let him stop it with his hand. Now, does this mean that if I see somebody on the road drinking alcohol, I immediately go up and smack it out of their hand? Like I saw this video of this guy, somebody sharing it on Facebook, this big guy, and whoever he goes around who's smoking a cigarette, he smacks it out of their hand. He's like, I'm saving your life. Right? Listen, if you don't have authority to stop the evil physically, then it's haram to do so. In other words, you don't have authority to go around and start wrestling people to the ground and physically stopping the evil like that if you don't have authority. Right? Now, if you're the leader of the Muslims, if you're put in that position by the leader of the Muslims, that's a different story. Right? For example, if the masjid administration appoints a security guard, mashallah, a security guard sees something evil, then he has some type of authority where he has his security license, of course, right? But he can, kind of escort somebody out of the building, right? He can stop the evil with his hand. But little old me, like you have to watch your position, right? So if you're not in a position to stop something with your hand, then don't do it, right? And this is a benefit that when you have kids now, when you have kids, if you didn't appoint one sibling in charge of the other, then he has no authority to stop it physically, right? It must come to you as a parent, right? So this is something that is very important that we have to understand as Muslims. A lot of people think that, oh, the punishment of stealing is cutting off the hand. Oh, let me do it. We spoke about this before. The capital punishment is to be carried out by the Muslim ruler in a Muslim country. That's it. No other situation. When the Sahaba would live in non-Muslim lands, did the Sahaba, when they lived in non-Muslim lands, did they implement this like this? And the answer is no. Right? These punishments were only carried out by the Muslims in the Muslim, in a situation of Muslim authority. Okay, so that's, and obviously it's going to lead to more corruption. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say, whoever sees an evil, let him stop it with his hand, and then that's it. No, because you might not be able to. You see how beautiful that is? The Prophet ﷺ is acknowledging that there could be a situation where you're not able to stop it physically. Now, if you think about it, aren't we all capable of going up to somebody and removing the evil or stopping it or pushing them away? Of course. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying, if you're not able, in other words, if there's going to be more evil, then stop it with your tongue, right? And if we don't have authority to stop with our hands, then we stop it with our tongue. We try to advise the person. We say, Akhi, fear Allah. Akhi, this is haram. Sister, what are you doing? Don't say this about the other sister, right? Right? You try to stop it with your tongue. Next principle that we're going to mention is first thing is first. First thing is first. When the Prophet ﷺ, he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen. And we spoke about this before, right? During the 9th year, basically a year before the Prophet ﷺ dies, he sends Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says to him, إِنَّكَ تَأْتِي قَوْمًا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ, that you're going to a people from the people of the book. You're going to Jews and Christians in this land. فَلْيَكُنْ أَوَّلَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ شَهَادَةِ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. So let the first thing that you call them to be لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. In other words, going into a non-Muslim land, the people are not Muslims. Are you going to tell them, oh, you can't wear gold as men? You can't drink alcohol? No. They're not even Muslims yet. You need to do first, you need to understand first things first. Right? And this is, a story I'd like to mention. One time I was in a masjid, not this masjid, and the brother just accepted Islam. And I think he had like a gold chain. He was just dressed, obviously he's a non-Muslim. He just accepted Islam. And right away, there was another uncle, right? May Allah bless him and guide him. I know who this uncle is. MashaAllah, very nice brother. But he made a mistake. Right away, he said, you need to stop doing this. You need to grow your beard. You need to get rid of the gold. X, Y. And then I felt like the brother was overwhelmed. You see what I'm saying? So first thing is first. Sometimes it takes time. Right? So you have to be wise. Right? You have to talk to people in a way that eventually down the road, they're going to leave the evil. Right? So you can't treat people, in a way that you don't want to be treated because you didn't come out the womb as a perfect Muslim. Right? You had things that took you years to stop. Right? We all, I'm pretty sure we all have experiences when we used to do things that are wrong and haram, but eventually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us to a way that's better. So just like that, you can't expect people to change overnight. You can't expect people to be like the Sahaba overnight. No, sometimes it takes time. It's going to take time for your daughter to start wearing hijab again. It's going to take time for your son to start praying 5 times a day again. But you don't do it in a way that causes the person to run away even more. Right? As I mentioned, you need to have patience and you need to be gentle. Right? So first thing is first, right? If somebody is not even a Muslim, you tell them about Tawheed first. You tell them about Islam first. Now, when they're a Muslim, what's the most important deed after the Shahada when you become a Muslim? The Salah. So if you find that he's doing a bunch of stuff, he may have a girlfriend, listen, tell him about the Salah. Because without a Salah, he can't be a Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Man taraka salata faqad kafar." Whoever leaves the Salah has disbelieved. So if this guy's not even praying yet, right, and he has the ability to learn, then he's still not fully a Muslim. He's a Muslim. We don't say he's a kafir, but there's rights that he needs to fulfill as a Muslim. You see how this works? So then there needs to be a step-by-step process. Right? There's first thing is first. And you need to understand priorities. Right? And when you don't get your priorities right, then you start causing corruption. Right? Like the Khawarij. Okay, the Khawarij during the time of the Sahaba. Right? They passed by, and the Khawarij were people that the Prophet ﷺ warned against, extremists, who would kill Muslims and call them kuffar and kill them and shed their blood. So basically, there was this group of these people, the Khawarij. They passed by a garden, and somebody was gonna go pick like a date from a date palm tree, or like some type of fruit. And then the other Khawarij told him, listen, you can't take the wealth of people unlawfully. You can't just pick somebody's fruit like that. You need permission. But these are same people that would kill some of the Muslims, right? There was one Muslim, Abdullah ibn Khabab, I believe his name was. He was the son of a Sahabi. What they did to him, listen, these are people that they had their priorities mixed up. They had their priorities mixed up. They would say this is haram to do, but then they would do things that are totally haram and not even care about it. So they went to him, this righteous Muslim, and they asked him some questions. They asked him some questions. And they asked him some questions about Islam because he was a son of a Sahabi. So right after that, they killed him. They slaughtered him. And then they went to his pregnant wife, and she was pregnant, and they cut up on her stomach and they killed her and the baby. Brutally, nasty, disgusting people. But they had their priorities mixed up. When it comes to a fruit on a tree, oh, akhi, you can't take the fruit from a tree. It's haram. But it's okay to kill people. It's okay to just murder people and make their blood halal and make takfir on Muslims. So some people, they have things totally mixed up. Right? So that's why we need to have an understanding of priorities as Muslims. So first thing is first. And obviously this comes with knowledge. And as we said, it's a prerequisite of stopping the evil to have knowledge. But you see, if somebody doesn't have knowledge, they're going to be all over the place. Right? So as Muslims, you need to have certain priorities set. So next principle that I'm going to mention, inshallah ta'ala, is that if somebody already advises the person, then it's not obligatory upon you to do so. For example, let's say you see somebody who is doing a particular evil act, right? And you hear that your brother already advised that person. It's not obligatory upon you to do it, but it's best to do so. Right? It's best to do so. And I just want to read a statement from Imam Nawawi where he explains this hadith in his explanation of Sahih Muslim. He says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ الْأَمْرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ. Imam Nawawi, he says, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is fardu kifaya. Now there's two types of fard in Islam. There's two types of wajib. Something that's wajib upon every single person, and there's a wajib that's obligatory upon the entire community. That if a few people do it, then the rest don't have to do it. Can anybody give me an example of this? Huh? I'tikaf, no. I'tikaf, the general rule is that i'tikaf is recommended, yeah. Calling the adhan, excellent. If one person, you see, it's an obligation for all of us that we have somebody call the adhan. Okay? But if one person calls the adhan now, if one person calls the adhan, then that suffices the entire community, right? What else? Answering the salams, excellent. If I say assalamu alaikum and some people respond and others don't, then they have fulfilled that obligation for the whole community. Excellent, yeah. Okay, salat al-janazah, excellent, right? So isn't it like when a Muslim dies, is it wajib for every Muslim, wherever they are, to now leave their jobs and their work and to go pray salat al-janazah? No. But if some brothers do it, if some sisters partake and they help out, then it suffices the Muslims and nobody gets a sin. But if there's nobody to fulfill this obligation, then the whole community gets a sin. Is everybody clear on this? And similarly is getting a surgeon, a Muslim surgeon. This is fardu kifaya. Muslims need somebody to provide the service, right? To teach knowledge, right? To be a scholar. To seek knowledge, to a certain extent, it's fardu kifaya. There are certain branches of knowledge that is fardu kifaya. In other words, memorizing the Quran and teaching the Quran, that's a fardu kifaya. But is it fardu for every single person? No. Right? So as long as there are people that are doing this job, alhamdulillah, everybody is sufficed by them. So Imam Nawawi, he says, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is fardu kifaya. Is everybody clear what that means? Right? And then he explains, إِذَا قَامَ بِهِ بَعْضُ النَّاسِ, if some people do it, سَقَطَ الْحَرَجُ عَنِ الْبَاقِينَ, the sin is lifted from the rest. Right? So if you hear that your brother advised this person before you, alhamdulillah, I don't need to do it, because enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is a fardu kifaya. It's a communal obligation. Okay, he then says, وَإِذَا تَرَكَهُ الْجَمِيعُ, if everybody gives up enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, أَثِمَ كُلُّ مَنْ تَمَكَّنَ مِنْهُ بِلَا عُذْرٍ وَلَا خَوْفٍ, that if everybody does not enjoin the good and forbid the evil, then everybody gets the sin unless they have an excuse. Let's say somebody, they're not able to speak, they're mute, or somebody is blind, or somebody's deaf, and they're not able to do it, right? That person is excused. But otherwise, everybody will get the sin. ثُمَّ إِنَّهُ قَدْ يَتَعَيَّنُ كَمَا And then he says, in some instances, it might be individually, like it may be an individual obligation on you to specifically do it. And he gives an example. إِذَا كَانَ فِي مَوْضِعٍ لَا يَعْلَمُ بِهِ إِلَّا هُ Sometimes it may be specifically obligatory upon you as an individual to stop the evil. For example, nobody else knows how to stop this evil but you. In this situation, it's not a communal obligation anymore. It's not an obligation for everybody. It's specifically an obligation for you. Does everybody understand how this is? For example, if somebody is committing a sin, right? And I can stop that sin with my hand and nobody else can, and I have the capabilities of doing it, but I allow it to happen, then I'm getting that sin because I'm the only one able to stop that evil. Right? And then Imam al-Nawawi, he then says, and then he mentions some other examples, but inshallah ta'ala his statement is clear. Now obviously if somebody advises somebody else, right, who's doing an evil, if you do it, it's better. Alhamdulillah, nurun ala nur. But it's not an obligation. Okay? I'm gonna give you one example. Right? I'm gonna give you one example. When it comes to like somebody came up to me and they told me that one of their family members like wears a lot of makeup. Right? One of the family members wears like a lot of makeup, right? So I found out that there was a bunch of people that already advised the person already. Now obviously I'm not here to talk about this particular issue, just a random example that came to my mind. So these people told me that how the person was advised and the person was already told, and the truth has been made clear to the person. So alhamdulillah, it's not an obligation on me or anybody because it is that obligation of forbidding the evil has been done. Does everybody understand how this works? All right. So and there's many different examples that we can mention, but I'm pretty sure we all have some situation that we can refer to in our minds, inshallah ta'ala. Now let's talk about some situations where you must forbid the evil, and some situations where it's haram to forbid the evil. Okay, there's certain situations where it will be haram for you to stop that evil. Okay, so let me just give you one principle, one governing principle of everything that I'm going to mention, because I'm going to mention some details now. And if you forget the details, always go back to this principle, that enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is based on weighing the pros and the cons. In other words, if there's going to be more cons than pros, in other words, if there's going to be more negatives than positives, then you do not you do not forbid that evil, right? But if there's more pros, there's more benefits than cons and harms and wrong, then I can forbid that evil. Is everybody clear on this? So all of these situations, I'm going to mention 4 situations that Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, but all of these situations are governed by this principle, right? Is that if there are more benefits, you do it. If there's more harms, you don't do it. It may be haram to even do it. Okay? So situation 1, all right? And for each situation, I want to focus on one example. Imagine you see somebody doing something evil, right? You're at the masjid and one brother, he's doing a sin in front of you and it's evil, right? He's drinking alcohol, right? Or he's beating somebody brutally. He's beating up his son and abusing his son for no reason, right? Haram. It's evil. And you see that evil and you want to stop it. There are 4 things that could happen. Number 1, if you stop the evil, he immediately stops and he says, brother, you've advised me, mashallah, right? Now if you think that he's going to respond in that way, do you guys think it's obligatory to advise him? Or you think it will be haram to advise him, or just whatever? Like, what do you guys think? It will be an obligation, right? Because the Prophet he says in this hadith, whoever is able, then he must do it, right? And because the Prophet mentioned that, that command, there's a principle that the scholars mention, and that is al-amru yufidul wujub. That anytime the Prophet commands something, that indicates that thing is an obligation. So you need to do it if the evil is going to get removed. All right? The second situation, the guy is beating up his son, right? Unjustly, right? He's like slapping the guy around and like beating him with a belt, and the kid is like bleeding, and it's a crazy scene, right? If you know, right? If you know that if you advise this person, he's not going to listen to you, but the evil is going to be less, right? He's not going to stop, but he's going to lessen it. He's not going to be as, he's not going to beat as severely, right? It's going to lessen it. Now, in this situation, is it an obligation? Because when you advise the guy in the second, in this second situation, he's not going to stop, but it's going to lessen. You guys think it's obligatory or not? It's still obligatory because you can cause a change. You can stop the evil to a certain extent. And any extent that you're able to stop the evil, it becomes obligatory on you now. Is everybody clear how this works? Right? The third situation is if you stop this brother, right? If you stop this brother from beating his son, he doesn't stop the evil, he doesn't decrease the evil, but all of a sudden he starts beating up somebody else. So he stopped, when you advise him, he stops from doing one evil to doing another evil that's of the same level. Right? He doesn't do something worse, he doesn't do something that's less, but he beats somebody else up. He beats up another child. For let's say for example that person gets involved, right, and they say something, and then he starts beating up on that person. So sometimes this happens. Somebody's in a fight, and you try to stop them, right? You try to stop them, and they try to get into a fight with you, or fight somebody else who's trying to pull them back, right? So in this situation, is it obligatory or not? You can advise him, yeah. Good, excellent, right? So this is sister saying that maybe in the future you can advise him. Maybe in the future he won't. I mean, listen, the scholars, they have difference of opinion on this point. They have difference of opinion on this point, right? But it goes to your ijtihad. It goes to what you think is gonna be best. Because like I said, all of these decisions, you have to make a decision before the effects happen. So at the end of the day, you're never certain. You could think that he's going to listen and then advise him where you think it's obligatory, right? But then he doesn't listen. So there's no guarantee here. All of the things that were mentioned is based on your decision that you have to make. If you think he's going to stop, it's obligatory. If you think he's going to lessen the evil, it's obligatory. If you think it's not going to lessen nor increase it, then the general asl is that you have to advise him. But like I said, it goes back to your judgment. It goes back to your judgment. Maybe, if you tell him something, maybe he may not stop, but you can advise him later on, right? Perhaps a person may think about it like, hey, this person was telling me to stop and I didn't, right? So you should, you should still advise that person, right? You should still advise that person. And this happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, how there was a man, he was beating a slave, right? There was a Sahabi, he was beating his slave brutally. And he was beating him so much that he couldn't hear the Prophet ﷺ calling him from behind. And the Prophet ﷺ was saying, oh, so-and-so, oh, so-and-so. I forgot the name of the Sahabi. But the Prophet ﷺ then told him, after he stopped beating him, he threw down the whip. The Prophet ﷺ told him that Allah has more power over you than you have over that slave. And as soon as he heard that, he freed the slave. Right? So sometimes it's still good to call upon somebody and to tell him, to fear Allah and to stop and to try to, stop the evil wherever it is. The fourth situation, this is important to understand. Right? We spoke about if he stops the evil. You advise him, he stops the evil. You advise him, second situation, it decreases the evil. Third situation where it doesn't make any change. The fourth situation now is if it leads to more evil. Right? You tell him to stop beating his son and then he kills the boy. Right? Or he starts beating up his son and other people at the same time. He doesn't just stop there and move to somebody else, but he starts beating up everybody now. He starts beating you up, beating your mama, beating everybody up, right? And it becomes worse. If you feel يَغْلِبْ عَلَى ظَنِّكَ, you have, like it's most likely that this is going to happen, in that case, would it be obligatory? Would it be haram? It will be haram to do so. Ibn al-Qayyim and Ibn Taymiyyah, many other scholars, they mention it will be haram for you to open your mouth and to stop him. Does everyone understand? Now, this may be like a hard pill to swallow, because if you see somebody doing something, right? Now, like I said, it's all based on your judgment. There's certain signs. Let's say you know somebody's planning to do something, and you know this person is gonna just go crazy and start fighting everybody. Then you just leave him, right? Now that's difficult. Now, obviously, this is a case-by-case, situation. Nobody is saying that when you find somebody beating their son, just watch there, leave and be like, oh no, he's gonna start beating everybody up. No, you have to. It's a case-by-case situation. But we're talking about the ruling on each situation so that we can have a general understanding. Is everybody with me so far? Right? Can anybody give me an example of how this actually happened? You advised somebody and they eventually did something worse? Can anybody give an example? Right? And like I said, this is not based on your actions. This is what the other person is doing. Can anybody give me an example or story? No? Right? But this is something that does happen. I'm going to give you a couple examples, inshallah, later. But I'm going to give you guys another principle. Right? Is everybody clear on these different situations? Is it clear? Right? Alhamdulillah. Now, another principle of, based on this hadith that I'm going to give you guys, is that if you feel that this person is most likely not going to benefit from what you're advising them, then it's not obligatory, it's just recommended. Just as we mentioned. Okay, now the reason why I'm mentioning a whole other principle on this point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of addresses this in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, وَذَكِّرْ إِنَّ فَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says to remind the people if the reminder will benefit. Okay? وَذَكِّرْ إِنَّ فَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, and remind, in other words, remind the people if the reminder will benefit the people. And the flip side of this ayah is, in other words, if the reminder will not benefit the people, then don't remind them. Right? Allah says, remind if the reminder will benefit. Right? If the reminder will benefit. In other words, if the reminder will not benefit, then don't remind them. Is everybody clear how this works? Right? So this is one of the proofs that Ibn Taymiyyah and many of the Sahaba, they used to prove that if you feel somebody's not going to benefit, then it's not obligatory to do so. Right? Sometimes you tell somebody something and you know this person is not going to listen. This person has been advised already. They just don't care. They have a different view. Right? They don't even agree with you in the first place. They don't agree with the Islamic concept. Then you know that it's just recommended. Right? You have to try to find some way to go about it. Now obviously we shouldn't just leave people. Right? Try to be a benefit to people as much as you can. I'm going to mention another principle, inshallah ta'ala. And like we said, every situation of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, it's based on pros and cons. It's based on weighing between the benefits and the harms, and you must do so. Right? You must do. If there's going to be more harm, it becomes haram to forbid that. Right? Is everybody clear on this principle? Right? Very important. Now, another principle that I'm going to give you guys, inshallah ta'ala, is that you can delay stopping the evil for a greater benefit. You can delay it. In other words, if you know somebody's doing an evil now, if you try to stop them, they're not going to listen, but later on, you can advise them, and that's going to yield better results, then it's permissible to do so. I'm going to give you guys an example. Let's say somebody is in the middle of a fight, right? Or somebody is just heated, they have so much emotion that they're not going to listen to you. You can delay it to a time where you think this person is more susceptible to listening to you. Right? Let's say, for example, a good example is your wife, she's upset. Okay? Your wife is upset, right? Instead of just, advising her right away, just wait till she cools down. Right? Wait till she cools down when things are fine. Oh honey, do you remember what you said, a few minutes ago, 5 seconds ago, and then you try to, advise her. Or for the husbands as well. Not just for the wives, right? The husbands, sometimes they get heated and you have to wait till they cool down. Right? So sometimes you can delay something if there's going to be a greater benefit in delaying that. Now let me give you some proof for this, okay? Because everything we want to mention some proofs, inshallah ta'ala. Aisha radiallahu anha, okay? Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a question, and this is in Sahih Muslim. Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, "O Messenger of Allah, why don't you just break down the Kaaba, destroy the Kaaba, and rebuild it the way that Ibrahim had it when he constructed it?" So the Arabs, the way that they had the Kaaba was not in the original way that Ibrahim put it. They kind of renovated it and changed it a bit. Okay? They made it a bit square. It's supposed to be a bit more rectangular. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, "Oh Messenger of Allah, why don't you just break it down and just rebuild it the way Ibrahim had it? That's best, right?" So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he responds. He says, "لولا حداثة عهد قومك بالكفر لنقضت الكعبة ولجعلتها على أساس إبراهيم." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that if your people didn't just accept Islam, your people just accepted Islam and they were just kuffar yesterday, if they weren't such new Muslims, I would have destroyed the Kaaba and I would have done it the way that you're suggesting. I would have made it exactly the way that Ibrahim had it. Now see, the Prophet ﷺ, he's delaying something because of a certain harm that's going to come about. Obviously, people's emotions are fresh, right? They've just, they have this attachment to jahiliyyah, to kufr, to disbelief. Just because they're a Muslim, a few days later, doesn't mean that all of a sudden their hearts are fully attached to the deed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because they were just, kuffar, and the kuffar, they were the ones that really changed the Kaaba. Because of that harm, they might get riled up and have too much emotion and feel hurt by the Prophet, "I'm doing this." He said, "I'm not going to do it." Right? So he stopped this particular type of evil because of a greater benefit that he could achieve later on when they have a firm Islam that is entered into their hearts. Now let me give you guys something amazing. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, who is the grandson of Abu Bakr, he becomes the Khalifa years later. Now Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, when he becomes the Khalifa for about 8 years. Now during his time, during his reign, over like 30, 40 years after the Prophet dies, right? Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he actually does do this. He renovates the Kaaba and he makes it the way that he thought the Prophet, the way that he thought the Prophet ﷺ would make it. Now, was there any uproar then? Was there any fighting then? No, not at all. Because the people are all Muslims now. Right? So do you guys see how the Prophet delayed something, but later on it was fulfilled because of that wisdom that he had. So sometimes if you see that delaying that counsel that you're going to give that person, that advice, if you feel that delaying it is going to yield better results, then you can do so. Right? So that, this is all part of wisdom that we must have. Now, inshallah ta'ala, I just want to talk about one last issue. And this is an issue that's very sensitive. Okay? And it's about the ruler. Okay? It's about the Muslim ruler. And I know, I feel like every week we've been getting some question. Right? Some question. So inshallah ta'ala, let's seal the deal. Right? Let's seal the deal, inshallah ta'ala, so that it's clear, it's fully clear, inshallah ta'ala. Because this hadith relates directly to the emotions that people have when it comes to the Muslim rulers. Oh, this Muslim ruler is not doing what he's supposed to be doing. We need to stop the evil with our hands. We need to go in there and just, kick him out and then get a new ruler and then blah, 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 and then the whole thing. Right? So we're very, very familiar with this concept. Right? So let's talk about how should we be when it comes to a ruler or a person of authority, whether it's the imam of the masjid, right? Whatever I'm going to say, inshallah ta'ala, applies to anybody in authority. Whether it's your boss, your boss at work, whether it's the administration of the masjid, whether it's the administration of a school or a country, it doesn't matter, anybody in authority. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the messenger, wa ulil amri minkum, and those in authority among you. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the believers to obey those in authority. Right? To obey those in authority. And there's so much wisdom in this, guys. There's so much wisdom in this. So, when it comes to you seeing an evil, the Prophet says, whoever sees an evil, let him stop with his hand. If he's not able, then with his tongue. If he's not able, then with his heart. Right? So when it comes to the tongue now, okay? When it comes to the tongue, when it comes to the hands, right? When it comes to physically stopping an evil and removing a ruler, we said that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that you are not to do so إِلَّا أَن تَرَوْا كُفْرًا بَوَاحٍ, unless you see clear kufr. In one hadith, the Prophet he says, مَا أَقَامَ فِيكُمُ الصَّلَاةِ, as long as the ruler establishes salah, you are not to revolt against them. Okay, you are not to revolt against them. And the scholars, they mention another prerequisite, another condition, and that is that there's no more evil than is present with this ruler. So the first condition before Muslims have any right to revolt against any ruler is, number one, he has to have left Islam. Has to be a non-Muslim ruler. And number two, right, there must be less evil than what is already present with this ruler there. And obviously in most cases it's not like that. That's why we have situations like this in the Muslim world, right? Where hundreds of thousands of people are being killed and slaughtered and they don't even know why. It's because of some people who didn't have this understanding, who thought that just because he's a kafir we can revolt against him, and that causes more bloodshed, more killing, more fitna. Right? So to have a ruler, even though he may be doing the wrong things, even though he may have kufr with him, but to keep the stability and the peace among the people, that's far greater, right, as a benefit to have. Is everybody with me so far? Right? So those are the two conditions when it comes to stopping the evil with your hand. And in most cases, that's very difficult. But when it comes to stopping something with your tongue now, the second level of inkarul munkar, right? How should if a ruler, if the imam makes a mistake, should you stand up in front of the entire jama'ah and be like, Imam, you're making a mistake, right? You need to step down, we're going to kick you out, and this is haram and goes against what Allah is saying. Should you do that, right? Or should you go to the side, and should you walk the person to the side? So there are different situations, all right? Now, I'm not gonna mention the entire statement. I'm just gonna sum it up, inshallah ta'ala. But Ibn Uthaymin, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned different examples. Number one, if the evil of the ruler or the person in authority, if it's private, you keep it private. Right? If it's private, you keep it private. If it happened behind closed doors, keep it behind closed doors. unless it affects, people, and this is a case-by-case situation. But if it's an evil that just involves himself, for example, you walk into the imam's office and he's watching something he's not supposed to be watching. Or you walk into the ruler's office and he's doing some haram, hanky-panky stuff, right? That's haram. If it's just involving him alone, then you advise him privately. Has nothing to do with the people, right? Has nothing to do with anybody else. It's a sin between him and Allah. So by ijma' of all of the scholars, you are to keep it silent. Don't expose him, right? And we're going to see in a couple of hadiths, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that whoever shields a believer of their faults, Allah will shield him in this life and the next. Right? So that's the first scenario where the ruler does an evil by himself that's just limited to himself. Situation number two. Okay? Situation number two. If the evil that the ruler is doing is open now. If it's open, we're not talking about private matters. We're talking about him doing an evil in the open. He implements a policy that's totally wrong. It's unjust. If you feel that there's going to be more benefits and it's not going to lead to more evil, then you can do so openly. In other words, if you know this imam is cool, that he's going to listen to you, right? He's a nice guy, he's not hot-headed, right? And you advise him, and obviously we said it has to be gentle. Don't forget that we said it has to be gentle. Just because you're stopping an evil and forbidding evil doesn't mean you have to call a person names. You nasty imam, you munafiq, and people do this. Who in the world is going to listen to you if you're calling them a munafiq? Right? You should try to advise a person with gentleness, right? Because that beautifies the scenario. So if you feel that advising this person openly is going to lead to more benefits, then you do so. But if it's going to lead to more harm, then it's haram to do so openly. Right? And that goes back to whatever we mentioned originally. Right? That if it leads to more harm, then you don't do it. And I'm going to give you the adillah and the proofs for all of these scenarios, inshallah ta'ala. Now when it comes to advising publicly, how do we know that we can do this in a certain scenario? Right? So there's a hadith in the Sahih of Ibn Hibban, narrated by Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, and it's a Sahih hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Sayyidu shuhada, that the chief of all martyrs is Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. Is Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the Sayyidu shuhada, the best of all of the martyrs. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, and the second person, وَرَجُلٌ قَامَ إِلَىٰ إِمَامٍ جَائِرٍ فَأَمَرَهُ وَنَهَاهُ فَقَتَلَهُ. And the second person, who is the chief of all of the martyrs, the best of martyrs, the second person is a man who stands up to an unjust ruler. And he commands him and he forbids him, and then he gets killed because of that. Right? So there's a certain situation where you can, now obviously maybe this man doesn't know that he's going to be killed. Right? Now if he knows that he's going to be killed, that's a different story. But perhaps he doesn't know that he's going to be killed. But he commands and he forbids the ruler openly. And then he gets killed because of doing so. So the Prophet mentioned a situation where somebody is doing something openly. And there's also a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. And this one is a statement of a Sahabi. Now this hadith, as I mentioned, is in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Now who's Abu Sa'id al-Khudri? He's the same Sahabi who's narrating this hadith. Very beautiful that we see how he implements this. So this is after the Prophet has passed away. This is around the time where Ali radiallahu anhu is the Khalifa. Okay? And this is a time where there's a lot of fitna in the Muslim community. Right? In the Muslim empire, there's a lot of fitna. So there was a governor of Medina, and his name was Marwan ibn al-Hakam. Now some of the scholars mentioned that Marwan ibn al-Hakam is from the Sahaba, like Ibn Hajar. He mentions that Marwan ibn al-Hakam is from the Sahaba. So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, he narrates a hadith and he says that how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way that he would pray the Eid prayer was that he would pray the salah, then do the khutbah afterwards. Right? He would pray the salah, then do the khutbah afterwards. That's the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ would give this khutbah, on the Eid khutbah, whether it's Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr, the Prophet ﷺ, right after he finishes, right after he would be done with the salah, he would get up and he would tell the people, whoever wants to stay and listen, let him do so. And whoever wants to get up, he can leave, it's fine. Right? In other words, the khutbah of the Eid is not like the khutbah of Jum'ah in terms of you having to be there. Okay, it's different. But the point of this hadith, brothers and sisters, is that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said that the Prophet ﷺ would pray the salah, the Eid salah, then he would give the khutbah. Now Marwan is the governor. Marwan is the ruler of that land, of Medina. Guess what happens? Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he says that it was on Eid. He doesn't remember if it was Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha, but it was one Eid. Marwan got up on the minbar and he was going to give the khutbah before the salah. He was going to give the khutbah before. Now obviously, is that a mistake? Of course it's a mistake. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet ﷺ used to always pray first, then give the khutbah. So then Marwan, he then says to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri that what you know is long gone. Right? Long gone. So then, and he says a statement that's very similar to this. So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he says, غَيَّرْتُمْ, that you've changed. In other words, you changed the deen of Allah. So then Marwan, he responds and he tells him why he's done this. He said that if I pray the salah first and then do the khutbah, everybody's going to leave. And that's what happens. Right? That's what happens. But because of that, he wanted to do the khutbah first. He wanted to address the people first and then do the salah afterwards. But obviously that goes against the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. Now Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the highlighting point of this story, did he reprimand? And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he said that when he was going up on the minbar to give the khutbah before the salah, Abu Sa'id said that I grabbed his thawb and I was pulling his thawb and he was pulling it back. And then they got into this kind of like small debate here. But if you look at this hadith, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri got up, he was pulling him down. He addressed him openly. So this goes back to that situation where a person thinks that there's going to be more benefits. Now obviously, did anybody die in this situation? No. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he did so openly, and this was the ruler, but it didn't lead to more evil. Right? It didn't lead to more evil. You see that? So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, you can see the fiqh that he had, the understanding that he had from this hadith that he himself narrated. Does everybody see how beautiful that example is? These two hadiths that I have given you, right? These all revolve around a situation where you think there's going to be more benefits in advising the ruler openly. Now, what about if it's going to cause more evil openly? If you say something to the ruler, and all of a sudden he's going to call, all of a sudden he's going to start slaughtering his people. Oh, my community, they're uprising against me. Let me slaughter everybody, right? Sometimes this happens. This has happened in Islamic history, where sometimes certain scholars, they got together, they spoke out against an evil, and eventually the ruler, what did he do? Slaughtered the people, right? Just killed the people and just killed all those scholars and just caused so much bloodshed, and then there's revolt and uprising, and then so much fitna happens, just because of one evil that they wanted to stop and to advise the ruler on. So if it's a situation that's going to cause more evil, the Prophet ﷺ, he teaches us how to respond in that situation. There's a hadith in the Muslim of Imam Ahmad narrated by Iyad ibn Ghanam radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Man arada an yansah li dhi sultan." Whoever wants to advise a person in authority, fi amrin, in any matter, fala yubdihi alaniyah. Let him not show it openly. Let him not advise that ruler openly. Right? The Prophet, he says, وَلَكِنْ لِيَأْخُذْ بِيَدِهِ. But let him take his hand. Okay, let him go into privacy. فَيَخْلُوَ بِهِ. Let him be alone with that ruler. فَإِنْ قَبِلَ مِنْهُ فَذَاكَ وَإِلَّا كَانَ قَدْ أَدَّى الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ لَهُ. The Prophet, he says that to take the ruler aside, to advise him privately. If he listens, then that. But if he doesn't listen, then you have done what's obligated upon you. Does everybody see how the Prophet mentioned different situations, that the best of the shuhada is somebody who gets up to an unjust ruler, right? An unjust ruler. And now the Prophet is telling us that there's a certain situation where you take the leader's hands and you go to the corner, right? You go in the corner and you advise them privately. Okay? And there's also a very beautiful athar, a very beautiful narration about Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. It was narrated by Sa'id ibn Jubayr. Narrated by Sa'id ibn Jubayr. He says, قال رجل لابن عباس. A man said to Ibn Abbas, he said, آمر أميري بالمعروف. The man is asking Abdullah ibn Abbas, who is a Sahabi. The man is asking this Sahabi, should I command my ruler with good? Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says, إن خفت أن يقتلك فلا تؤني بالإمام. He says, if you fear that he's going to kill you, then don't advise him. Don't reprimand him. You see, because that's going to lead to a greater evil, right? Leading to your death. And we spoke about cases of necessity, where somebody puts a gun to your head. Can you say a statement of kufr? Yes. right? But it can't be in your heart. So, Ibn Abbas is saying, if it's going to be a situation of necessity, right, where you feel that you're going to be killed, then don't advise him. Leave him, because that's going to lead to a greater evil. Then Ibn Abbas, he says, فَإِن كُنْتَ لَا بُدَّ فَاعِلًا. Ibn Abbas then says, but if you're going to do it anyway, because just because somebody gives you a death threat doesn't mean that, if you're in a situation of necessity, that you have to stay a statement of kufr. It's better to be strong, right? Ibn Abbas, he says, but if you're going to do it, he says, فِي مَا بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ, then do it privately. Do it between you and him, just privately. Okay, don't do it in front of the people. Okay, so this was the advice of the Sahaba. And there's another principle that the scholars mentioned, that if somebody fears that if in joining a good they're going to get some punishment that they can't bear, then it's not obligatory upon them. It's not obligatory upon them, because this is a situation of necessity. Like if a person, they're going to get imprisoned, or if a person is going to get killed or beaten or tortured, right, then it's not obligated upon that person to stop that evil. Okay, this was the view of Imam Ahmad, as the scholars mentioned. Now, what is not considered like this situation of necessity, if somebody just curses at you, right? Somebody just says something bad about you, right? That's not considered a reason for you not to speak out against the evil. Okay, but inshallah ta'ala, if you guys stick with the guidelines that I've mentioned that were based on the understanding of the Sahaba and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then you'll be in the right way, inshallah ta'ala. Now, the last part of this hadith is very important. The Prophet ﷺ, and like I said, listen, I've given you certain general guidelines. I'm not a politician. I'm not a political expert. I'm not going to tell you about this country and that country and what you should do. No. I'm not going to do that. Okay, because that would be unjust for me to do so. Why would I tell you how to deal with Pakistan and Indonesia and Saudi Arabia when I don't even know about the situation of these countries? You guys understand what I'm saying? I'm not going to tell you what to do in your own country. Listen, contact your scholars, contact those people of knowledge about those specific areas. But these are general principles of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? So listen, contact people who have knowledge about these political matters. I don't, okay? Now, the last part of this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, if you can't stop it with your hand, if you can't stop it with your tongue, then hate it in your heart. And that's the weakest of Iman. That's the weakest of Iman. If you see somebody doing evil, you can't stop with your hand. You have no authority. You can't speak out with your tongue, because that's going to cause you to get hurt or killed, or is going to lead to more harm. At least what you do, you hate it in your heart. And that's the weakest of Iman. Right? That's the weakest of Iman. Now let's talk about what that means. As a Muslim, you must at least hate evil in your heart. If the weakest of evil is to hate evil in your heart, then what about people who love evil? Just think about that. If the weakest of your Iman is to hate evil, what about somebody who loves evil? What does that say about their Iman? Wallahi, that's scary. So as a believer, when you see something that's evil, you must at least hate it in your heart. Let me give you one excellent example, or two examples. Number one, is alcohol legal above 21? Yes, it is. Does it mean that just because it's legal, I can't dislike it? No, you can dislike alcohol. As Muslims, alcohol is haram to drink. Haram to drink. Now, I can't, sometimes I can't stop my brother from drinking with my hand. I can't stop him with my tongue. He's not going to listen, right? But at least, at the very least, I should hate this action, even though it's legal. No, we don't object to that, right? But moral grounds, we say that that's a wrong act Islamically. So we hate it in our heart. If you think that that's fine, somebody can drink and it's fine and they can party, then you have a serious problem with your Iman. Because the weakest of Iman is to hate that thing. And if you love it, wallahi, that's a scary place to be. That's the first example. Second example is homosexuality. And there's a reason why I mentioned that first example. Because just as alcohol is legal, homosexuality and gay marriages is also legal. But just because alcohol is legal, do I have to like it? No, I have a right to dislike it. Similarly is homosexuality. Right? Listen, it's legal. We have no problem with that in terms of, the fact that we don't have an authority to change that. Okay? It's whatever. I mean, we live in this land. Okay, there's many things that are legal that are haram Islamically. All right? We can't do anything about those things. But when it comes to homosexuality, very important. There are some people, they're saying different strokes for different folks. It's fine. It's okay. And a person doesn't hate it in their heart. So just as there's no problem, nobody says there's any problem to hate alcohol, but this act of homosexuality, how can we say that it's something good, where it's something detested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I don't understand how there could be a Muslim who thinks that this is fine Islamically. Ijma', consensus, there's no difference of opinion that homosexuality is haram. Right? We can quote the verses of the Quran about the people of Lut, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them because of that. Allah Azza wa Jal called them qawmun tajhalun, ignorant people, qawmun musrifun, people who are transgressing the bounds. Right? You know, so there's no room for this type of differing here. We should be on the same page here as Muslims. Now, just because I can't stop it with my hand, just because I can't stop it with my tongue sometimes you can't. Right? Oh, he's being homophobic. He's like, sometimes you're in a situation where maybe it's very difficult to do so. But does that mean now that I have to accept it in my heart? Does everybody understand how this works? No, it does not mean that. Right? And I know this is a very sensitive topic. Listen, if there's somebody who's homosexual, you know, we're not saying that person's going to go to Jahannam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best about that person. Right? Everybody can change. Everybody can find the right way. But at the very least, we have to hate it in our heart. Right? Is everybody understanding what I'm saying here? Right? It's very important for us to understand this. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because if somebody accepts evil, if somebody believes that something is haram, something is evil, is good, that might lead to kufr. That might lead to disbelief. And there's ijma' of the scholars that if somebody makes halal something that's normally haram and there's no difference of opinion about it, if somebody makes that thing halal, that person is instantly a kafir. Obviously with the conditions, right? That there's no ignorance and the other conditions that the scholars mentioned. But I'm not saying this statement. I'm going to read to you the statements of two scholars, Ibn Qudama. In Al-Mughni, Ibn Qudama, he says, وَمَنْ اعْتَقَدَ حِلَّ شَيْءٍ, and whoever believes that something is halal, أُجْمِعَ عَلَى تَحْرِيمِهِ, which the scholars have agreed, the Ummah has agreed that it's haram. If somebody believes something is halal, which is agreed upon in its forbiddance, وَظَهْرَ حُكْمُهُ بَيْنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and the ruling of this thing is clear among the Muslims. وَزَالَتِ الشُّبْهَةِ فِيهِ لِلنُّصُوصِ الْوَارِدَةِ فِيهِ. And it says, and there's no doubt concerning the texts that have been related in this particular thing. Right? Whoever makes some, so let me repeat what he's saying. He's saying whoever believes something is halal, which the Ummah has agreed that it's haram, and the ruling of this thing is clear among the Muslims. There's no, misconception here. It's clear. Every Muslim knows this thing is particularly haram. He says, and he gives some examples. كَلَحْمِ الْخِنْزِيرِ. Everybody knows pork is haram. وَالزِّنَا in zina. Right? And fornication. Everybody knows that that's haram. وَأَشْبَهِ ذَلِكَ مِمَّا لَا خِلَافَ فِيهِ كَفَرَ. He says, whoever makes these things halal has disbelieved. Has disbelieved. And we read to the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah. He mentions in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, he says, إِنَّ الْإِيمَانَ بِوُجُوبِ الْوَاجِبَاتِ الظَّاهِرَةِ الْمُتَوَاتِرَةِ وَتَحْرِيمِ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ الظَّاهِرَةِ الْمُتَوَاتِرَةِ هُوَ مِنْ أَعْظَمِ أُصُولِ الدِّينِ وَقَوَاعِدِ الدِّينِ وَالْجَاحِدُ لَهَا كَافِرٌ بِالْإِتِّفَاقِ. Ibn Taymiyyah, he says that establishing something as obligatory when the Sharia has done so is obligatory. Right? And he says, and making something haram that the deen has made haram, he says that this is one of the greatest principles of Islam. Whatever Allah has made halal, you make it halal. Whatever Allah has made haram, you make it haram. And he says, whoever rejects this, he says, whoever rejects this, فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ بِالْإِتِّفَاقِ. This person is a disbeliever, and there's no difference of opinion about that. Right? So something dangerous to accept evil in your heart, because it's the weakest of Iman to hate it in your heart. Now, one of the other things, if you're not able to stop something, at the very least you hate it in your heart, and there's another condition as well. And we're going to end with this, inshallah ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions about stopping the evil in the Quran. Allah mentions in Surah An-Nisa, وَقَدْ نَزَّلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ, and He has revealed to you in the book, أَنْ إِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُكْفَرُ بِهَا وَيُسْتَهْزَأُ بِهَا. Allah mentions that it has been revealed to you in the book that when you hear the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people disbelieving in the ayat and making fun of the ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أَنْ إِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُكْفَرُ بِهَا وَيُسْتَهْزَأُ بِهَا فَلَا تَقْعُدُوا مَعَهُمْ حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِهِ. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says that if the ayats of Allah are being denied and made fun of, that you do not sit with them. You do not sit with them unless they move to another topic. Allah mentions why we should stay away from people who are doing evil. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, إِنَّكُمْ إِذَا مِثْلُهُمْ, that if you do so, if you entertain their discussion and you don't remove yourself from the evil, then you're just like them. Then you're just like them. إِنَّكُمْ إِذَا مِثْلُهُمْ, that in that case you will be just like them. Okay, read Surah An-Nisa, you'll find this ayah in there. So if you can't stop something with your hand, you can't stop it with your tongue, right? That at the very least you hate it in your heart and you need to separate yourself. Remove yourself from a gathering of evil. Right? If you can't do anything about it, why are you going to sit down and entertain that gathering? That's a form of acceptance now. That's why Allah says that you're going to be just like them. Right? And then Allah mentions, إِنَّ اللَّهَ جَامِعُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ وَالْكَافِرِينَ فِي جَهَنَّمَ جَمِيعًا, that Allah will gather the munafiqun and the disbelievers in the fire altogether. Right? So that's something that's very serious that we have to understand as Muslims. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us fiqh in His deen, understanding in His deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are keys to good and not locks of good. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we call the people to what is right, and that we use hikmah, and we use all of the guidelines that have been established in the kitab and the sunnah and the ijma' of the ummah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us all tawfiq. Does anybody have any questions, any comments? Yes. Anyone?
Someone prayed sunnah after Asr prayer. Is it correct to stop him or tell him that what he did was wrong?
Okay, very good question. So if somebody prays the sunnah after Salatul Asr, okay, generally there's no specific sunnah prayer after Salatul Asr. After Salatul Asr. There's a hadith in Sahih Muslim where narrated by Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu. The Prophet, he says, لا صلاة بعد العصر حتى تغيب الشمس. That there's no salah after Salatul Asr until the sun goes down, until it's Maghrib time. There's no salah after Salatul Asr until the sun goes down. And there's another hadith in Bukhari Muslim where the Prophet ﷺ, Uqba ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet forbade us from praying in three specific times. Okay? And at the end of the hadith, he says that the Prophet forbid the Sahaba from praying حين تتضيف الشمس للغروب, when the sun is going down and setting. In other words, after Salatul Asr. Okay? So this is a general principle that there should generally be no salah after Salatul Asr until Maghrib time, as the Prophet forbade the Sahaba from doing so. But the scholars, they make an exception, right? It's not a view of all of the scholars, but inshallah ta'ala this is the correct view, and that is that if you're praying a salah that has a reason to be prayed, then you can pray that salah. In other words, if you missed a sunnah prayer, if you missed a sunnah prayer earlier in the day and you want to make it up, you can make it up after Salatul Asr. Okay? And there's a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, I'm going to give you proof for this, narrated by Maymuna radiallahu anha. Narrated by Salama radiallahu anha. It's in Bukhari and Muslim that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed 2 rak'ahs after Salatul Asr. After Salatul Asr. Right? So Salama radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, what are these 2 rak'ahs? You're praying a sunnah prayer after Salatul Asr, just like what the person is asking in the question. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, Atani nasun min Abdul Qais. That from Banu Abdul Qais, a delegation came to me. فَشَغَلُونِي عَنِ الرَّكَعَتَيْنِ اللَّتَيْنِ بَعْدَ الظُّهْرِ. And they distracted me from the 2 rak'ahs after dhuhr. The sunnah prayers after dhuhr, فَهُمَا هَاتَانِ. These are the 2 prayers that I'm making up. So you see how the Prophet ﷺ, how he prayed a prayer during this time of general forbiddance, but he prayed it because he had a reason. So salahs that have reasons are like making up a sunnah prayer that you missed, or praying sunnatul wudu, or tahiyatul masjid. Any salah that the reason, like you're doing it for a reason and it's not nafil mutlaq, then it's permissible to do it even if it's in a time of forbiddance. Okay, and there are 3 times that you're generally not supposed to pray. We mentioned after Salatul Asr until Maghrib. The second time before that is when the sun is highest in the sky. When the sun is highest in the sky. And the third time, which is actually the first time, but I'm just kind of going backwards here, is after Salatul Fajr. After Salatul Fajr until the sun rises. Until the sun rises. Okay, now there's a hadith. Okay, there's a hadith narrated by Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu in the Sunan of Abu Dawud, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "La salata ba'da al-fajr illa sajdatayn." Right? That there should be no salah after Fajr except sajdatayn. Let's say somebody woke up for a Fajr and they prayed the Fard prayer, but they didn't pray the Sunnah prayer. You can make up the Sunnah prayer even in that time we are not supposed to pray. So addressing the question, once we have these general principles, going back to the question now, if somebody is praying, then you should maybe just assume that that person has a reason to do so after Salatul Asr, right? But if you're able to, then maybe just ask that person. Ask that person. And for most cases, we pray for a particular reason, right? For 9 times out of 10, you're going to find somebody's praying because they missed the Sunnah prayer, or they want to pray the Sunnah of wudu, or Tahiyat al-Masjid, right? For the most part, it's very rare to find somebody just praying nafil mutlaq. We could just pray whenever we want to, as long as it's not in the times of forbiddance. So in most cases, the person would have a reason, but still you can double check with that person. But don't stop them right away, because perhaps they may have a valid reason. Does that make sense? Alhamdulillah. Anyone else? Yeah.
When someone's praying with the short pants, right?
Yeah.
And I feel uncomfortable to tell him that. And there were a lot of people, they don't do anything. Was I wrong for being silenced too?
So when it comes to this particular situation, and many situations like this, like I said, it depends. It depends. Sometimes you look at your relationship with that person, you look at how that person is gonna listen. Sometimes you don't know the brother. And like I said, in certain cases, remember one of the principles I mentioned is that you can delay something if you feel that there's going to be some more benefit there. So listen, the general rules, you have to try to advise that person in one way or another, right? Maybe like a form of advising that person is to maybe just, like, let's say, for example, right? Let me give you an example. This brother, he comes to the masjid all the time with short pants. Right? All the time. He's been doing it for months now, and nobody has told him anything, right? Nobody's told him anything for months. Let's say the brother doesn't even know. He just accepted Islam, he doesn't know. An easy way to do this is, listen, for the next salah, if the imam is doing Madinat Boost, or he's doing, Gardens of the Righteous, Imam Noor, just have somebody just mention something, right, that you need to be covering. The Prophet mentioned that the awrah of a man is between his navel and his knee, right? The belly button and the knee, you need to cover that as a man. And there's also another hadith where the Prophet says that no man should pray unless he has something over his shoulders, right? Unless he has something over his shoulders. A lot of brothers don't understand this. You can't pray with just like a tank top, right? With your shoulders uncovered. You need to cover your shoulders. But this is just specifically for salah. If you want to jog with just shorts from your belly button to your knee, then you can jog, no problem. But in salah, you need to cover your shoulders. So you can maybe have the imam just advise the people generally. Right? If the imam has done that, if the brother listens or he doesn't, then the imam has fulfilled the obligation of the community, right? But obviously, somebody like that, a particular situation like this, right? The imam is the best person, and like, to be honest, that person has the most right to say anything anyway, right? Because in most cases, that person has more knowledge, and people respect that person's statement more. Sometimes you tell somebody something and like, oh, who are you? You don't know what you're talking about. But when they hear about something from somebody who they feel would know better, then they're gonna listen, right? Sometimes a husband tells his wife something, oh, like, be quiet. You don't know you don't know what you're talking about. But when maybe she hears it in a lecture, a sheikh, and he says it, and all of a sudden she follows it, right? Or a husband, right? In many different situations. So, like I said, there's not just one way of going about it, right? If you can advise a brother, do so. But sometimes you may need to be a bit smart, right? You don't want to hurt the brother's feelings. Pull him aside. Right? So it all goes back to the pros and the cons, and just weighing the harms and the benefits, inshallah. Anyone?
So he's coming with he coming with the salah. He say when he coming, he had the ruku already. In the ruku, when Imam goes to ruku, he came to the ruku. So we pray together, inshallah. After that, if you make a ruku, you get the rakah. So he finished the rakah and he make another rakah. So I told him, brother, when you catch the ruku, you finish the salah. Next time you don't have to make it up.
Yeah. I mean, alhamdulillah, you've done what you have to do.
Yeah,
you advise them. One thing I did not mention though, that's very important, and mashallah, your question reminded me of it, and that is that when it comes to issues of difference of opinion now, that's when you got to be careful. Okay? If you find that there's a difference of opinion now, right, and there's many opinions that the scholars have, and somebody's following a particular opinion, right, you don't make inkar of that person. Okay? There's a principle that the scholars mentioned, that la inkara fi masail al-ijtihad. If it's a matter of ijtihad that's subject to difference of opinion, valid difference of opinion, then you don't reprimand that person. Do not consider that an evil that you have to stop. Is everybody clear on this? Sometimes somebody follows a different opinion. I'm going to give you one example. When it comes to trimming the beard, the majority of scholars have the view that it's permissible to trim the beard. They differ as to how much you can trim. But let's say a brother, he follows an opinion that you can trim the beard. He still has a beard, but he trims it. You can't be like, Akhi, you're going against the sunnah, you're doing something haram. You can maybe try to convince the person why your view is right, but you cannot consider that an evil that you have to stop with your hand or your tongue or your heart. Is everybody clear on how this works? If you find a brother is praying a particular way with his hands here, issue of difference of opinion, right? That's not something where, akhi, you got to and like abandon the person and he's an innovator. No. It's an issue of difference of opinion. So issues where there's valid difference of opinion of the scholars, you have to be careful and you have to be tolerant. The Sahaba, they were tolerant with each other. Somebody prays a bit different. When it comes to, many different aspects. Food, right? Does this break the fast? Does not break the fast? There should be no reason why you're calling names and we're making this a big deal, right? Issues and matters of difference of opinion, we should be lenient in, right? So inshallah ta'ala, if somebody, they follow another opinion, I'm not particularly familiar with any other opinion. I know some scholars, they mention other things by which the rak'ah is caught by, if he follows a different opinion, then, you advise that person if he doesn't know. I don't know of any other opinion. But the Prophet ﷺ, he says, من أدرك ركعة من الصبح قبل أن تطلع الشمس فقد أدرك الصبح. In a hadith of Abu Hurairah, he says that whoever catches a rak'ah of the Fajr prayer before the sun rises has caught the Fajr prayer. And the scholars explain that the rak'ah refers to the ruku'. Okay? So inshallah ta'ala, that's the right view. But like I said, there's other opinions. It shouldn't be a reason why we reprimand somebody. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yeah.
Case of forbidding evil that you mentioned, is calling 911 is also forbidden?
Okay, so the thing is calling 911 is, listen, sometimes it's necessary, you have to get your rights, and the scholars mentioned that it's permissible to go to a kafir judge or a kafir authority, non-Muslim authority. Obviously, we're living in America, we don't have authority as Muslims to help each other out in certain ways. So you have to contact the authority. In some cases, you should. There will be no excuse to do so. Otherwise, you're going to land yourself in some big trouble, right? You see an evil and you don't contact the authorities, you might be held accountable for that by the authorities. So listen, you call the police if it's a situation, where it's going to cause more evil if you try to advise that person. In the masjid, if there's somebody who's beating up on people, listen, call the police. Call the police right away. Don't hesitate in that, right? We don't have that authority to put people in prison and to put people in check like that. You need to call the police. Like the other night, the brother who was trying to steal from the masjid box. Alhamdulillah, police was called, they came, they arrested him, right? And this is a couple times that this has been done, right? So listen, so to get certain rights, you have to call the police, you have to call the authorities. Now obviously, if I can advise the person, we can have a dialogue so they stop, okay, that's what we do. Nobody needs to get, any charges, or nobody has to get arrested, right? But it's perfectly fine, inshallah ta'ala, to get your rights. We'll take one more? One more, inshallah? Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. When we see kids or adults who play video games inside a masjid, is it an act that requires us to stop them?
If kids are playing video games in the masjid?
Or adults, yeah.
Or what?
Or adults.
Dolls?
Adults.
A dog? Wait, what? Oh, adults. Adults. Okay, so if it's a permissible game to play and they're not causing any problems with it, then it's fine, inshallah ta'ala. It's fine, inshallah ta'ala. It's not a haram game. It's not like they're watching pornography or they're doing something, If it's a permissible, like the other night, during the New Leaf program, right? There were some brothers in the back, and they were playing, some games. They were quiet about it. They weren't causing, any problems. Inshallah ta'ala, it's fine, right? Now, listen, obviously, is it best to do that in the masjid? Obviously not, right? This is, when the man peed in the masjid, the person pulled him aside, and the Prophet told him that this place is only for the dhikr of Allah, the recitation of the Quran, and for salah. So that's the purpose of the masjid. We don't come here to play video games. Now listen, if that's gonna lead to more brotherhood, and it's a permissible game, of course, then it's perfectly fine. Bismillah, right? We're playing dog on the bone, or we're playing some wrestling in the masjid, huh? We're like doing some type of activity that's gonna bring brotherhood. Then Bismillah, it's okay. But as long as it's not causing any harm, it's not distracting people, then it's okay, inshallah. Right? So let's stop here. It's getting late now. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.